with Sandy. Today in this members only video series, we're going to dissect pajama pants. I'm going to teach you all the tricks that I know about pajamas. I've been teaching making pajama pants for over 10 years. They are super easy to make for beginners, and there's great techniques that intermediates will like because it will expand their skill set a little bit. Now you can find all kinds of pajama patterns out there. I personally like to take a pattern that I use over and over and over again, and then that way I know it fits right, I like the way it looks, and it's comfy. So my go-to pajama pants pattern is silhouette pattern 3414, and you've seen me use this pattern a bunch of times for slacks. I just did a pair of wide leg pants for Minerva. I have several other options. I wear them all the time. They're comfy. They have an elastic waist. She calls them woven yoga pants, Jag's woven yoga pants. So they're made with a non-stretch material, and they're perfect for pajama pants. And one of the best parts about using them as a pajama pant pattern is you get to know the pattern. So you play with the pattern with pajama pants, which you wear around the house, most people, and you can fix them so they become a great slack pattern and use them with a nicer fabric that you can actually wear out. So we're going to look at these today. So I like silhouette 3414. It's the Jag woven pants. I've used this for pajama pants over and over again. I've used it to make all kinds of pants that I wear out. Wide leg pants, you've seen tons of videos where I've used them and blog posts. It's a great pattern to explore how to make a pair of pants for beginners and also for intermediates that want to expand their skill set a little bit. There's some really good techniques, and we're going to go through tips and tricks so you can have the absolute perfect pajama pant. But you can find this pattern on my website, on my Etsy website, and you can also find it at silhouette.com. And then I have some fabric here that we're going to use, which I also have on my website. But this is the pattern that I would use. You can use any pajama pants pattern that you like. The techniques are all the same. Creating a pair of pants, there's simply 3 seams. There's the side seams, the inseam, and the crotch seam. And you can do them in any order, and each pattern will have them in a different order. Personally, this is the way I like to make them. And this one also has a separate waistband. You're going to get a much better fit with that separate waistband instead of the, super convenient but not well made rollover waistband. So if you take a pajama pant pattern and you use that specifically, it's going to be a pajama pant pattern. If you take a pattern like this that is actually a pants pattern, use it for pajamas because it has an elastic waist. Perfect the fit while you're making the pajama pants. Then you have this great pants pattern base that you can, it's almost like a sloper, and you can use that to go forward. So today, in this video, we're going to talk about measurements, and we're going to talk about fabric. So the first thing you want to do is wash and iron your fabric. No matter what fabric it is, you want to treat it the same way that you would treat it after the garment's made, because you want to make sure it's not going to shrink. So if you stick it in the dryer, if you plan on sticking it in the dryer once it's a finished garment, then wash and dry it before you cut it out, because you want it to shrink if it's going to, before you put all this time and effort into it. Now, one thing about silhouette patterns, on the back, they give you the finished garment measurements, and that's very important. If you look at the big 4 like Simplicity and McCall's and Butter, most of, not all, but most of their patterns on the back is the body measurements, and then they determine the ease, and we don't want them determining the ease, and the ease is the difference between your body measurements and the measurements of the garment, and how much looseness you want. And you're going to wear your garments very different than I'm going to wear my garments, but we want our pajama pants to at least have a little bit of ease. So we're going to look at the back. We're going to take a handy dandy measuring tape, and we want to measure on this. It gives us the hip and the waist. So we'll start with the hip because we need the hip to fit. That's really the waist. We can take in or let out a little bit, but we definitely want the hip to fit. So we're going to run this tape measure around the widest part of your body, and your hips, if this is my waist here, your hips are about 6 to 7 inches depending on how tall you are from your waist to your hip, and it really is the fullest part. Now that's wrapped around my body so it fits. I can't sit in this. That's certainly ridiculous. So I want to give myself 2 or 3 inches where this is how I want my pants to fit, right? Go bigger, and you can always skinny them down the sides a little bit if you have to, but if they're too small, there's no way back, right? So I'm going to say that this is my measurement for my hip that I want it, and I'm going to look on back of the pattern and determine what finished garment size I want. So if my hip measured, say my hip measured 46, and I wanted about 3 inches of ease, that would be 49. So I want my finished pants around the hips to measure 49 inches. On this pattern, a 6W is 50 inches, so I would make the 6W. The 5W is 46 inches. That might be a little bit too small. So you could also cut it in between. The goal though is to keep all the pattern pieces the same size. The other thing you want to look at is the waist measurement. Now the waist measurement is with the elastic, right? So the waist, your waist measurement, it's the same thing. This is going to fit, right? You don't want this too loose because your garment's going to fall down, right? So it needs to fit, but that's what the elastic is for. It also needs to go over your hip. So if your hip is 46 and your waist is 40, you can't make the waist 40. The waist has to be 46 because it has to go down over your hips. Now you can make it 40 with the elastic, but that waistband needs to stretch so it at least goes over your hips. That's the key. Right? And you can make them big and oversized and they'll be absolutely lovely, but this is where you start. This is the base for starting with this pattern, with pretty much any pattern. Like, what size do you want it when it's all finished? So that's the first thing we need to take into account is the measurement. The next thing we need to take into account is the fabric. Now this reindeer fabric, or llama, sorry, it's not reindeers, it's llama, is really cute. I have this also in my website, and I'm going to turn the camera down so we can talk a little bit more about how to manipulate this fabric. All right, so here we have this really cute llama fabric, and one thing you're going to notice is that all the llama's heads are going in the same direction. That is really important when you're cutting out a pattern. If you have something that's all over, an all over design, it's not very linear and specific, then it's not an issue. But we don't want to lay out our pattern pieces so they go this way. That's the first thing we don't want. We also don't want half of our llamas upside down. So when we're cutting these out, it's very important to make sure that the top of each of your pattern pieces is heading the right way with the fabric. So if we fold this salvage to salvage, I have it just spread out here so you can see it. It's really cute. And this is flannel. So this pattern, this Jags woven pant, is for a fabric that doesn't have stretch. The pattern is designed for a non-stretch fabric, so that's what I have. And for pajama pants, flannel is one of the best and most coziest things to wear. So now my llamas are going side to side for you, but I want to make sure that when I lay my pattern pieces down, I have the top of the front up here, and then as I move down to the next piece, I have the top of the back down here. That's really important. Now for the waistband, probably you're going to go this way and the llamas are going to be sideways, and that's going to happen. I don't think that's an issue with pajama pants because the waistband's only going to be about 3 inches. You could cut it this way and piece them together. Certainly if that makes you happy and you want all your llamas lined up, that is definitely an option. But for this pant, we need 3 or 4 pieces depending on what you want to put on the pant. So the pant has a front, right? We cut 2 front pieces, and it has a back, and we're going to cut 2 back pieces. It has a slash pocket, which takes 2 more pieces, so that's piece 5 and 6. So we have 1, 2, piece 3 is the waistband. Piece 4 and 5 is the slash pocket on the side. Sorry, piece 4 is the patch, there's a patch pocket on the back, my mistake. Piece 4 is the patch pocket on the back. Piece 5 and 6 are the slash pockets that are on the side. And then this has a faux fly front, which is really kind of nice. It is a way to get started making a fly for a zipper, like a pair of jeans. They have a fly front. It's a very different type of zipper insertion. This one, there's no zipper, it just looks like a fly. So we're gonna go through all of these techniques one at a time. But the first thing we need to do, the very first steps to get started, is to take our pattern pieces, decide what size we want to make, and then cut them out. And we want to make sure that we cut them out for this fabric, that we work from the top to the bottom. So the pattern for the pockets, the pattern for the patch pocket, if you want the pattern for the waistband, those are all things that need to be placed carefully on the fabric. And if you line this up on the selvage edge very carefully, you will get a straight line. If you're a little worried, because this is very linear, if you're a little worried about one of your pant legs going sideways a little, you can take and cut a single panel and then flip it over, because we need mirror images, and cut the second panel. So you can cut the front on one side and then flip it over and cut it on the second side if you want to make sure that the llamas this way are lined up and one isn't kind of going sideways. And that is all we're going to do with measuring and our fabric. So I'm going to lay my pieces out and cut them, and I will return for a moment to finish up this video about measuring and fabric and pattern cutting. All right, I'm getting ready to cut my first pattern piece. You can see, you may be able to see that I've already made some edits to this pattern because I have used it a whole bunch of times. So what we want to talk about is how to lay this out. Again, I want the top of my pattern piece. This is piece 1. It's the pant front. And I want the top of my pattern piece to be where the llama heads are, facing that direction, because otherwise they would be upside down. Now normally this grain line, you can see this grain line, this big line going down the center here. Normally that grain line you would measure and make sure that it's equidistant from the selvage part of the fabric. You want to make sure, let me slide this over a little bit. You want to make sure that this is on the straight of the grain. If it's not, then your pant leg may twist, and we don't want that. However, I also don't want my llamas going off in one direction. So if this was a solid or an overall pattern, I would measure this part from the grain line to the selvage is 9 inches, and I would weight that or pin it, and then I would make sure that the other side of the grain line was 9 inches, and I would just move this pattern piece up and down until it was on grain, and then that way my pants wouldn't twist. However, we are working with a pattern that's very linear. So if you have a stripe, a plaid, this happens to this pattern, I am going to actually look down and make sure that my pattern runs straight, and I'm lining something up on the repeat. So I'm actually lining up this one llama's nose all the way down, because I want the visual of that straight of grain more than I really care about it being off grain a little bit. So I'm cutting this in a single layer because, like we discussed before, I want to make sure that my llamas are straight on both sides, and when my fabric is folded in half, I can't actually see what's going on the other side. So I'm going to cut this one out, and I use these weights. They're just washers, big heavy washers that I got at a big box construction store like Lowe's or Home Depot. You can probably get them online. Instead of pins, they're faster. You don't have the same disruption of like dimples that you would get with pins. Pins kind of leave a dimple. The other thing that I have done is I ironed my pattern with a very light iron. I made sure my fabric was washed and ironed, but I also ironed my pattern because it's been folded up in my little pattern envelope for a while, since the last time I used it, and I don't want any crinkles in here or any crinkles in my fabric, because that will change the length or the width for better or worse on my finished product. So you want everything nice and flat and even so it comes out the same. Because you imagine if you had a crinkle going across here, this leg would be longer than the back, and then the pattern pieces wouldn't fit together appropriately, and we don't want that. So I have my llama, my little llama print. And since I'm doing these one at a time, I want to make sure that when I do the next one, I flip it, because I want a mirror image of my pattern. And also, flipping it this way, I can line my pattern pieces up pretty beautifully. So I'm going to flip this, drag it so you can see. And I really don't need the tissue anymore. I can take the tissue away for this part because I'm just going to use the first side that I cut out as my pattern, and I'm going to line it up as best I can. And this time I'm going to try to line up the little feet, right? So if I line up these certain llamas' feet across and then make sure that they're lined up straight this way. So if I look at the straight of the grain, I think this is gonna go this way a little bit. I wanna make sure that the straight of the grain is lined up on my pattern piece. You can also put this down and check it that way. That makes you more comfortable. You can just lie this down and check that this piece and this piece are running the same way, and that's easy enough to do. You can just weight it down and lift it up and check the piece underneath. That looks pretty straight, so I'm happy with that. So I'm going to take this tissue out of the way so I don't cut into it by accident, because I already have my pattern piece here. And this, again, you really don't need to pin. And I mean, I use these weights, but I also use a ruler or my phone or my water bottle, whatever I happen to have handy to cut out my pattern piece. And, you know, I lay my own pattern pieces out. I have made this pattern several times. I suggest that you lay it out, the whole pattern out, as best you can before you start cutting. I mean, I know I have 3 yards of fabric here. I know I have more than enough fabric, but you don't want to get to the end and realize you don't have enough fabric for the waistband or, you know, for a pocket or something like that. This is a pretty straightforward pattern, but it has some really interesting techniques that you're going to learn. So these are my 2 front pieces, and they are mirror images of each other. Right, we want to have mirror images. This is the crotch here, right? This slash is where the pocket goes, so the pocket actually extends this out, and we're going to cover the pockets in the next video. But you can see my llamas are straight up and down. They are, the feet are aligned across this way enough that I'm comfortable with them. I'm pretty happy with the way these came out. They're pajama pants. But if I was going to do a really nice pair of plaid trousers that I was going to wear out, I would want to be meticulous. So if you decide to choose a fabric that is a one-way print, just remember to keep the tops of your patterns all in line. I'm going to go cut out the rest of my patterns, and in the next video we're going to do pockets. All right, until next time, happy sewing. Bye.